Welcome to the Iowa Outdoorsman Podcast. Brought to you in part by Dakota Decoy Company, Nansen Farms, and Vitalize. And now your hosts, Brandon Hilton and Randy Thomas.
Okay, we're on. This is the Iowa Outdoorsman Podcast. I'm Brandon Hilton. With me, as always, Randy Thomas. Hey, Randy.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. Today we are talking about tournament bass fishing in general. We got a good guest to talk about that. He's the one of the founders and the tournament director of the Iowa Premier Bass Series, Mr. Scott Steinkritz. How we doing, Scott?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. I met you, boy, it's been several years ago now when I joined the Iowa Premier Bass Series. And before we get too far into it, why don't you give us a little bit of background, when you got started, how you got started, what kind of drove you to do what you're doing with the Iowa Premier Bass?
Yeah, if I can remember, it's been so long. I'm looking, seeing the gray hair in your beard and gray hair in my beard. I don't think we had gray hair. And I had a lot more of it back in the day then, too. So, yeah, actually started IPB back in 2009 with a buddy of mine, Lance Baker. And, really how we got into it was, I don't even remember how I ran into Lance. Maybe it was at a tournament. But, the point was, we need something a little bit different. A lot of the series seem to be the same. There's a lot of clubs, and we didn't want to start a club because of the politics that were involved, but we wanted to kind of up the game of what was available. There were, some other predecessors that had left, like Team Supreme was a great series that, wasn't around anymore. So Lance and I had the idea after going to the Fort Madison BASS that, hey, why don't we try to do something that's real showy and fun and put a little bit more money out there. So that's how we got started. We just wanted to put on a great series, run it really well, make money, actually attractive in the tournaments, and then also go to different lakes. While we still fish the local ponds that we all fish now, we also thought it'd be fun to try something different, and we decided to go to places like Saylorville and Red Rock and Rathbun, and people thought we were nuts for trying them out, but we did, and it was fun, and that people started liking that too. So that's kind of a short example of how we got started.
Sure, and I remember when I got kind of invited, I think Lance was the one that reached out to me. I had written a series on the old IowaOutdoorsman.com, and I think that it was a tough tournament down at Rathbun, and the next tournament was at Saylorville, and Lance reached out and said, hey, why don't you kind of come and check it out and see what we're all about? And I came up there and blanked. Guys caught fish, but it was fun to get on the bigger water.
Yeah, Lance was great about helping me promote this thing, or helping us promote it back then. He knew everybody, still does, and was real good about, hey, we got to get the right people involved to kind of help promote and launch the series.
So what really set you guys apart? Was it more going to these bigger reservoir type lakes as opposed to the Badger Creeks and stuff like that?
I think that helped, but really what we did was we tried to make it a show. We had a PA system, so I tried to make it as much like a mini BASS event as we could, the Bassmaster Elite type stuff where, we had the music and we give away prizes, and when people were coming up to the weigh-in, one of us is on the microphone making a joke or telling something about this or something about that. We brought in a bunch of sponsors that were local. Well, we had some bigger sponsors too, like Bass Pro Shops, but we had Brightwells and Water's Edge, and then a lot of the local jig and lure makers that show up also. So we had as much as we could in a small tournament setting, right? That really we wanted the guys to feel like they were something special. And we wanted to bring out the best sticks in the state too, if we could. And the only way that we could do that was by pushing up the cost of the tournament. And I think, we when we started back in 2009, it was $150 per boat to get in, and that was up there back then.
Yeah, it was, and you guys really, by going to the bigger water and putting on the show, that's really what set Iowa Premier Bass aside from everybody else, probably turning into one of the more popular series in the state, and really drawing out some of the big guys because the entry fees were higher, the cash payouts were higher, and you were putting on a good show. So let's talk about, from the beginning, not necessarily the beginning in 2009, but maybe walk the listeners through what it takes to go out, get your lakes. There's, some legal stuff you have to do with the DNR, and what all does it take to put together a good show like that?
Yeah, back then, we still had, a lot of other series out there, but not the number that we had today. So, what we've got to do, we start planning in July, August, September of what lakes we're gonna go visit, and then when the DNR opens up the registration for the lakes, then I think back then it was like January 1st, we'd all jump online and race to get our lakes based on the dates that we wanted. So you look at the calendar, you pick the lake, you pick the date, and we would try to think about, all right, in April, if we go in April, what lake is going to be challenging, but also put in a lot of weight, right? We didn't necessarily want to just go to a lake where, for example, right, that if you go to Little River in April and May, you're going to just catch a crap ton of fish. We knew we could do that, but what we thought of is, well, where could we go to be challenged and see if we can get these guys actually, instead of catching a 15-pound bag, to catch a 20-pound bag or a 25-pound bag? How could we really push that limit and make the guys fish harder for those quality fish? And like you said, Brandon, you go to Saylorville, you might have blanked. A lot of guys did blank, but those who did catch the fish caught really big fish. So anyway, you start with figuring out the dates, going after the permits, requesting the permits, hoping that you fit. Then if there's a conflict, you have to talk with the DNR and try to work with the other directors to figure out what's going to work best. We didn't run into too many conflicts, and all the directors that are out there are really good to work with. So and even to this day, we'll call each other before and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, this is what you're going to do, do you mind, are you on these lakes, are you on that lake, what are your plans and stuff. And then after you get the lakes and the permits, then you got to start recruiting guys, teams to come fish with you, and also go out and beg for sponsorship, right? And one of the things that we always try to do is if we got a sponsor, we wanted to say, hey, we will give you 10% back, or 10 times more than whatever you gave us. Whether it's baits, we're going to try to get 10 times more whatever you donated in dollar value. If it was dollar value, like for Bright Wells and Water's Edge, my goal was always to get at least one boat sold for them every year or more if I could, because I'm talking to everybody going up there. If I can't get a boat sold to them, then I got to promise them that I'm going to have service come their way. So there's a lot that goes with being a sponsor or getting sponsors, as you guys probably know, and it makes it builds in that requirement, that responsibility back to them that I think is important. And a lot of guys don't think about when they go out asking for $50 here or $50 there to help run a series. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some good information on the promotional side. What advice would you give to somebody who is thinking about getting into competitive local bass fishing or any competitive bass fishing? What would be the most important factors to consider before they get into it?
Read the rules of each tournament, right, that you get into. Understand, because every tournament's going to be run a little bit differently. Know the rules before you get in. One of the things that we still kind of fight with is, we want to try to control the weigh-in as much as possible, make it go fast, but also eliminate any question of cheating. So we ask guys to use our bags, right? You just come grab our bag. We keep 5-10 guys going at a time that way. When somebody brings up another bag, everybody's kind of looking at it and go, all right, who are these guys? So read the rules. Make sure you kind of have an idea of what bass tournament fishing is like. Talk to the director. I love it when people who haven't fished with us before call me and ask me how I run it, what I wanted, what I expect, what should be expected of them. Um, be courteous. Don't come out there with an attitude thinking you're going to do well. And if somebody comes near you, you're going to yell at them. That's one thing that we absolutely don't permit. Um, yeah, well, practice if you can, if you really want to compete. And I guess that's the other thing I would say. Go out there, and everybody likes to compete. I mean, we're all athletes, but remember that you're not going to get rich fishing Iowa tournaments, right? You're out there for the fun of it. So go to have a good time.
Well, you're not going to get rich this. Oh, I really thought you would.
Hey, I laugh, man. We all got these, expensive rigs and expensive boats and, $20,000 worth of electronics. We're going out there fishing for $1,000 and we get ticked off if we get second place and only get 800. I mean,
Those guys that do stock car racing.
exactly.
Interesting you brought up the cheating thing. Have you witnessed anybody attempting to cheat? If so, what's the most interesting attempt you've seen? Not like lead anchors in the belly.
I have not seen any lead anchors in the belly. We've had interesting things in the weigh tank afterwards, but you don't always notice where it comes from. And you don't know that it was in a fish, right? On a fish, whatever. We try to run our scales really carefully, right? So I'll be calling the weights. I have another person who is actually taking the fish and measuring them, another guy who puts them in a bag, puts them on a scale, and then I'll call the weights. And that way that those fish are looked at. We don't have the anglers actually putting the fish in the bag or anything like that. And that helps control things. As far as witnessing cheating, no, I haven't seen any. There's been a lot of accusations out there over the years, but fortunately, I think most of the Iowa guys are either really smart that they're doing it, and we don't know, or they're just really good anglers and really honest people. I guess
Good job,
Midwest, not just Iowa.
I didn't win enough to ever be accused of cheating.
They knew you
No, that's
weren't
true. You
cheating.
didn't.
So you mentioned earlier about reading rules, and as far as the angling goes, and knowing the specific tournament rules. But it's my understanding, and I've been out of the game a little bit from the tournament bass fishing, but the DNR rules have changed a lot as far as what you can do as far as live weigh-ins, allowing tape measure weigh-ins, and when do you have to be off the water, certain times culling. What do you see in there and changes, or what are some of the stuff you have to stay up on that maybe changed since 15, 20 years ago?
I think obviously COVID made things really strange for us, right? So we had to make some strange changes for COVID, which, whether you agree with it or not, you had to obey it, and you had to also be respectful of everybody else out there. We actually would do weigh-ins. There was a time when they wanted us to have everybody wear masks, right, while we're coming through the weigh-in, which was, that was something that I pushed back on the DNR when we got into the summertime, because you've got people that might have some health issues, right, and having that mask on when it's 100 degrees might not have been the right thing to do. And I will give a ton of credit to the Iowa DNR. They were extremely respectful and understanding and willing to work with us in every way. So that's something that I would say to all of your listeners and viewers out there. Iowa DNR is kick butt. They are great guys. They really want to make Iowa fishing good for everybody. They respect tournament anglers. They want us to have a good time and do a good job. So they work with all of us directors to make the rules the right rules. So what we've seen is during tournaments, on the majority of the lakes, we're keeping it at 15 inches. Even if the DNR might let us go down to 14 or 12 on the river, or whatever it might be, we try to keep it up there for the guys. And the DNR is willing to work with us. You talked about culling. There are, we can go and apply for allowances to have one guy in a boat with 5 fish rather than just 3 fish or whatever that limit might be. So again, they're willing to work with us on how we do that. They're willing to let us release the fish. Even Minnesota DNR and Wisconsin DNR let us do that. They've taken away that forced no cull rule. They let us cull most of the time now, which before, depending on the body of water, you couldn't cull.
Our DNR, I feel like we're pretty fortunate. They encourage our outdoors activities more than you hear from other states do. Um, More outside the tournament, more on based on just about fishing in general. What is the biggest fish you witnessed caught in one of your tournaments? When was it?
Ah,
Hilton?
I know.
go for it. What do you say, Brandon?
I believe didn't Dave Van Houten pull in? Wasn't that one of your tournaments at Rathman? He when everybody whacked him, he had like an 8.4 or something.
Yep, there was an 8.4 caught. There's been
Wow.
a 9 pounder caught. We have not caught a 10 pounder, and we've actually caught some. I'm trying to remember up at Mille Lacs. So we go up to Mille Lacs too. That's a favorite of a lot of the guys, so they can get into the monster smallies. And I think one of the smallies up there was 8 or 9 pounds, just a
Wow.
football, huge fish.
Huh.
So yeah, Tony Steverson Jr. caught a 9 pounder down at 12 Mile years back too.
I remember that one, but was that your tournament?
I don't think it was my tournament. Again,
Oh,
they all mixed together, but I just remember Tony catching a 9 pound fish going, geez, I think that was actually, it might have been a Stockers. Yeah.
I do
Wow.
remember that one. And now
But
that we're
that's what,
talking about bass fishing, let's get into some of the tournament stuff and some of the highlight stuff. What are you seeing now? Over the last handful of years, some of the changes with electronics and new fishing techniques and how guys are approaching bodies of water. What's some of the big changes in bass fishing that are most effective right now?
yeah, I mean, look at the electronics, right? Holy cow. Brandon, when you and I were out there, we were talking the other day, and it was all sonar, right? What's the best Lowrance you can get for down scanning, and now it's side scanning and 360 scanning and live scan and live target and all the different brands out there for everything. I mean, it's like playing a video game.
Mhm.
And I'm still old school enough to try to go slow, but like everybody else says, when you get out competed a lot of the times, depending on the body of water or the anglers, if they really know what they're doing with their electronics. I give my partner a hard time sometimes because he uses live Humminbird Live, and uh, you can get caught playing video games because you see those fish, right? And you can see your lure coming in, and you're pulling the fish with you, and you can't get them to bite, and it's frustrating. And sometimes you gotta speed each other up or slow each other down depending on what it is, because that you can see so much now. And I'm curious what's next.
Yeah. What's next? That's an interesting thought because do you anticipate when it comes to tournament fishing there ever being a stop to how much technology is allowed? And because to a point,
Well,
I mean, when you get to where you're watching the fish on video, I mean, how much obviously there's some skill involved in that, but I
yeah,
mean, and where do you draw
yeah,
the line?
yeah. That's a great question. I remember who was it that won a tournament down in a Bassmaster Elite with a Alabama rig, right? And that was one of the first things I did was say no Alabama rigs, right? I wanted to make it fair for everybody because it seemed like that was an unfair advantage. Um, and I still, we go by Iowa law, right? So I still don't have to
Hmm.
worry about Alabama rigs with 15 hooks on them. But as far as the electronics and where to stop, I don't know. I mean, you're already playing video games. You can see the fish. You can tell what species they are on the lot, on the live scan or Humminbird Live or Live Target. I guess I think there will always be a modification and some type of an allowance. But hopefully, if it gets unfair, if they're baiting the water, I mean, what else would you do, right? I mean, we got
Yeah.
sound, we got sight, we got everything that you can think of to help us fish right now. Um, hopefully guys don't want to make it that easy, right? I don't, it's kind of like playing a video game where you know the cheat codes. What,
Yeah.
what fun is that?
For long, you
Well,
won't
and,
even need
and
to catch the fish. Just turn in a video of the biggest one.
Yeah.
really though, I mean, if you think about it, back in the olden days, it was an 18-foot boat with a 150, and that was it maxed out, and everything just got bigger, faster, better over time. And I mean, just like everything else in the world. I think some of that really boils down to is, the Rances and the Garmins of the world. If they don't compete and keep coming out with new stuff, people quit buying stuff, right? So they have to outdo themselves to continue to progress and be profitable in their businesses as well. And that's why I just don't see they would. I'm sure they would have too much say in like downsizing or backscaling any electronics or any horsepower ratings or anything like that, because then sales slow down. I mean, if you didn't introduce this side image and forward image stuff, then we'd all still be tooling around with our little Lowrance graphs and just down imaging. And, a guy like me wouldn't be fishing any deeper than his flipping stick touch bottom. So, but yeah, that's a great question, Randy, because you do sit there and wonder about it. What's next? And so, but on the tournament side, are you seeing guys bringing in better average bags now with the introduction of all this, high tech equipment?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. We've got such great anglers that I always expect the weights to keep going up. We've got a great DNR that's taking care of the lake, so I expect the fish to keep getting healthier. I think maybe what I would say is I see more consistent full bags, right? More teams bringing in full bags than they would before because everybody's getting electronics, so they can find the fish. They can even understand the topography of a lake, right? Knowing that now, guys are better educated on how to at least catch fish. Look at Okoboji. I'll go there. We finally saw somebody catch 30 pounds, and Hurt and Halverson, man, that's a heck of a team up there. And did they use electronics? Yeah, but I also think that lake is absolutely on fire, and those guys are great anglers. And they understand the fish and they know what's going on. So it's tough to tell what made that happen. I think it's just a combination of everything. It's knowledge. I think the lures are better. You look at all of the technology, lures, line, rods, reels, everything has made such huge leaps and bounds in bass fishing over the last 10 years. It's bound to improve the weights and the numbers of fish caught.
Well, and let me have a follow up, I guess, to that question. Then, when you're out on the lake fishing, do you notice are more guys fishing offshore structure? Because like back in the olden days, when you'd show up to like Badger Creek, for example, one guy would go right out to the bridge. It seemed like maybe a couple deep points, and everybody else was kind of in a big circle, just kind of beating bank and looking for those brush piles that they already knew were there. So are guys migrating out to more structure offshore, seeing less guys beating the bank because they've got the electronics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say no. I think there's still a lot of guys beating the banks like they always have, and the fish are there, right? So it's guys still fish what they're really comfortable fishing. Even if you've got electronics and you're not used to fishing offshore, I don't think you're going to go offshore and try to figure it out during a tournament. You're going to practice what you think you're going to fish in that tournament, so you're going to stay along the banks. Guys, Tony and I, we fish offshore because a lot of times we're the last boat out, so there's nothing left to fish. We can't fish the banks. So, and I love fishing offshore structure or offshore structure and cover too. So, it's what you're comfortable with. And the other thing I'd say, Brandon, is not necessarily are the biggest fish always offshore. They're just different fish offshore. So to that though, one piece, if we're talking about technology, one piece that I think changed the game the most would be spot lock and whatever Motor Guide's target lock is, right? It's just that ability to sit now and stay in a spot without the wind blowing you all over the place. That changed the game tremendously for me.
That's a good point. And that's a simple one.
Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
Well, next to technology, you can see the fish, but you got to get them in the boat. So, what do you think over the past couple years, as far as landing fish from baits, tackle, has been the biggest innovation to improve hookups in these tournaments, and especially in Iowa?
Oh man,
No
that's
Alabama rig.
tough. Yeah, that's tough. I'd say the improvement of the Cinco.
Yeah, that's my
I
number
don't
one.
I don't know. I mean, you got so many techniques, right? So you'd have to ask each individual angler what their lure and style of choice is, right? I mean, when things get tough for us, we go back to the Ned rig, right? We want to go really small and really slow. So I think that's been a big change, right? And then drop shotting also. I remember when both those techniques came out, and it seems they've stayed around and they've kind of withstood the test of time.
Huh.
Yeah, it's interesting when you really think about it and you go back, but there's certain things like a spinner bait, you know, always been around, always relevant. You can catch fish on a spinner bait, your crankbaits of varying depths. Some of the things I've been following, there's a place in Ames called Skunk River Baits. It's a local place making these, or at least customizing them. But these new big glide baits, the guys
Hmm.
are throwing these, 3 to 6 ounce lures and just going out hog hunting basically with those. Are guys throwing those in tournaments? Have you seen any of those tied on decks?
Um, I can't think of any of the six. Well, okay, so you know how this works in tournament fishing. You might think you see something on a deck that's working, but that's usually a decoy, right? So everybody's seen the guy when they're getting ready to go out, they got that pink Cinco on, or when they come in, they've got, torn up Cincos all over the boat. You find out they were throwing a jig and pig the entire time. So, yeah, I have heard of guys throwing some of the bigger glide baits. Um, I've heard of guys, throwing a form of an Alabama rig with only a couple of hooks out there. Some of the bigger deep diving crankbaits too. It's a crapshoot. What do you find is working in practice? And it's do you have the guts to go out there and throw it and practice with it in a tournament, or practice with it and then throw it again in a tournament?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still old school. I'm gonna throw a jig and I'm gonna throw a Cinco and a Ned
I
rig.
was gonna say, what's your go-to?
I think the go-to for me is a jig is always going to work. It's going to catch something, right? And then if it gets tough, I'll probably go to a Ned rig, and hope I don't snag and break 50 of them off in a tournament.
Yeah.
So, how many tournaments did you say you guys had this year? It was kind of a scale back year for you.
Yeah, this year was a scale back year. My oldest daughter had my first grandson, and she's in Florida,
Congratulations.
so I knew that it was going to be an interesting year, so I did scale back. We're doing 5 tournaments. We've got 2 under our belts already. We got one coming up on the river, July 29th and 30th, down at Fort Madison, actually at Burlington. So we're going to fish pools 17, 18, 19. We haven't done that ever before. So once again, trying to mix things up a little bit. Then we're going to come back in August. We'll do 12 Mile on August 12th, and we're going to go down to Stockton in Missouri. So these are, 2 days on the river, 2 days at Stockton, and then we're going to do a 1 day at 12 Mile. So, and then the other big difference this year is we were closed. We were closed series for a while. This year we went back to opens just because I didn't know what it was going to be like, and I was real late to get the permits this year.
So you guys still have openings. How would somebody go about getting into it if they wanted to join the tournament?
Yeah, so you can always call me, but I've also got Iowa Premier Bass at .com online, and then also an Iowa Premier Bass Facebook page. All the information's out there. What I require is you register, send me some money to make sure that you and your teammate are in, and then show up. Fish, it's pretty easy.
So, for those new guys, if somebody did just call you, tell them what to expect when they show up, especially like a 2 day tournament on the river or something. What's
Yeah.
your process for draw and introduction and how you go about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that, like, if we're got local, to kind of the Des Moines area, or somebody who's wanting to fish the August 12th one down at 12 Mile, we put the lake off limits a week in advance. So starting that Monday before, we don't want guys going out there practicing. We want to try to make it fair for those who can. And you know what you do when you register, I will draw. I do an electronic draw. I use randomresults.com, and I try to post it on Facebook if I can. I'll do that Friday before, and then I'll send out an email. I'll send out a Facebook post. I'll try to text everybody, let them know what their position is. We like to launch at safe light, so figure out whatever sunrise is and go about a half hour before that and get ready to fish. So show up, check your live well. After I do that, give you a ribbon, put it around your trolling motor. That way we know that you're in the tournament. Then you can go ahead and load your boat. If nobody else is loading at that time. After everybody gets loaded, we get on the water and make a couple more announcements. We say a prayer over the entire field that's out there, and then we start blasting off. For the 2-day tournaments, I waive that restriction on a week off limits. I have you off limits Friday, the night before the Saturday tournament. So 5 o'clock, you're off the water, and then a lot of times guys will get together, and I love the 2-day tournaments because guys get together for dinner. We have a beer, go to a local restaurant, whatever, and just have a good time. I do that both Friday and Saturday night. And then as far as the launching process is concerned, same thing, right? You show up a little bit before you expect to launch, and then we get you out there as quickly as we can. And then with the weigh-in, we try to keep weigh-ins really fast because we want to get guys to get their fish back in the water, and if they want to go home, get them home as quickly as we can too. So we do control the weigh-in that way, like I mentioned with the bags. But because I've got 3 guys up there helping me, it goes really quickly, and anglers are great about that because they want to get off the water and they want to get home too. Because usually, especially now, right when it's going to be 100 degrees and hot and sweaty and humid, guys don't want to sit out there and listen to everybody else's weight. They want to know if they cash a check, and then they want to get out of there and get back in air conditioning.
Everybody's in a hurry to get home. Are there any requirements as far as boat, or are there other equipment that people need to know about if they are interested in getting in one of these tournaments?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So one of the requirements is that you do have at least $100,000 of liability insurance. You have to have a live well. We want to keep those fish alive because you are deducted you have deductions for dead fish, and you also have deductions for short fish. So maybe put a tape in there so you can measure the length of the fish, make sure that they're legal. Life jackets, anytime the big motor's running, I want you to have your life jacket on, a Coast Guard approved life jacket. Trying to think what else. You have to be rated accordingly for your motor. Still at 250, I haven't changed that rule to allow 300 horsepower yet, but I guess I could, especially when you're on a no-wake lake. It doesn't really matter. But that hasn't happened yet, so I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
So long term Iowa Premier Bass. You wrap this season up. What's it look like?
Oh man, every year is different, right? I don't know. I've already started thinking about what lakes we're going to do next year. I want to go back to a closed circuit. What's tough about the closed circuit is if you travel too much. If I could do anything, I would do 2-day tournaments all the time, every year, because it really brings out the best of anglers, right? You got to learn how to manage your fish. And plus, the way that I look at tournament fishing, I don't look at it as what money can I make, because I think it's foolish when you've spent that much money. But again, that's my opinion. I'm looking for the camaraderie and the friendships that I can make on this, and the different men that I get to hang out with. I really believe that there's something to be said with that brotherhood that's created when we're out there. But I'll figure out some type of a mix. I'm not going to do this forever. Just because now I got grandkids, and I've got kids living in Florida and here, and another one going to college. So I just take it kind of as it comes. Once it stops being fun, I'll probably back out.
Hilton, good job not slipping into that liability insurance, trying to get some business out of that. I don't know if you know where anybody would get any of that insurance.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me, Randy. Anybody needs some liability insurance? Call the Iowa Outdoorsman here, Brennan Hilton.
Jeez. You're a new sponsor for Iowa Premier Bass coming on.
There we go.
Oh yeah, you go.
He can finally contribute.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, hey, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this conversation up. This has been a good conversation. I'm a big fan of bass fishing. Used to be a tournament angler and did the Iowa Premier Bass Series for a few years, and I miss it. But kind of the same boat that the kids getting baseball every weekend, all weekend for the last probably 10 years. And my 14-year-old just got done with weekend ball. So my weekends are back. So we'll see. Maybe you'll see me out on the water a couple times next year on that by my wife.
Don't call the comeback.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't be much of one. I can promise you that. I'd be the guy at the restaurant drinking the beers with everybody more than worrying about what kind of bags I'd bring in probably at this point.
I think you cashed I remember you cashed a check or two over the years. Don't be so humble.
Every now and then. But hey, Scott, no, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a great conversation. Good luck to you and the guys through the rest of the season, and good luck to next year and whatever comes your way.
Hey, thanks,
Yeah,
Brandon
thanks for
and
joining
Randy.
us.
Randy, really appreciate you having me. This has been a great opportunity. Good luck to you guys too. Keep up the great work.
All right,
Hey,
we'll
thanks a
do.
lot.
Thanks, guys.